Game loaded.
And we are live. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Script Doctors. Myself, Lessons Learned, here, and we're going to be talking about Fallout 4 this fine evening. This should be about an hour. Hey, hi. Hey, Chaboma, how you doing? Welcome to the program. We're going to be talking about Fallout 4 because I've been playing a lot of Fallout 4, heavily modded, of course, because that's how you play a Bethesda game. So, why are we talking about Fallout 4? Besides the fact that I've been playing the game, is because I actually like the game a lot, in spite of itself. And so I thought it would be a good idea, and I hope you're not picking up a lot of background noise, hopefully, and yeah, we're not picking up a lot of background noise. Heavily fan patch, yes. Because, well, there's a very simple fix to Fallout 4. My biggest problem with Fallout 4 is the narrative. And it brings a point that I've been trying to make for many, many years. And this is an excellent example of this. And that is you write the story for the game that you're making, not the other way around. Right? Let me ask you something. If we were to ask you, what is Fallout 4 about? I think most people would say it's a story of a character that comes from the future past, right? The retro future of 2077, based on the America's 1950s, an Americana, who gets frozen, has their spouse murdered and their child taken, and then they wake up 200, 300 years in the future, in the what's called the Commonwealth. It used to be the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in the East Coast. Yeah, Sean. The name of the child is Sean, right? And goes into an adventure to retrieve his child. That's one take on what Fallout 4 is. The other take is Fallout 4 is a game about exploring this Commonwealth, killing enemies, and building communities and making connections in the communities and exploring that wilderness, right? Totally divergent takes. One is a very linear story about finding a child before it's too late. It starts as an infant, then becomes a child and something else. It actually stops being a child altogether. And the other one is about, some people have described it as a Minecraft Fallout edition, right? And I'm going to say the following. The way you fix Fallout 4's narrative, it's to punt, take the baby out of it. Just kick the baby out of the window, get rid of that entire storyline, and concentrate on what the gameplay is and support that. So we're going to be talking throughout this video, this stream as well, video when it comes over to the bots, about a Fallout 4 without that storyline. Now, not everybody liked the idea of, Minecraft Fallout Edition. I actually love that aspect of it. One reason why I mod Fallout a lot, because I want to include arcade games and different beds and, wall posters and creating my own buildings. I want to do all of that, right? And I find that being and going to, saving, rescuing, kidnapped people and all that. But people say, oh, there's another mission about helping another settlement. I actually enjoy that. But that's not the focus of the narrative. The narrative doesn't support that gameplay. Instead, it has you have a very linear pursuit of practically a very ugly baby, I'm sorry to say, a babe in order to save it. And then there's a plot twist in the middle that completely discombobulates everything, at least when it did to me, and then throws a bunch of factions into it, and it's like, well, here's your game, right? So if we don't have Sean, we don't have that as motivation for the player character, the murder of a spouse and the kidnapping of a child, what do we have? Let's begin at the beginning. First of all, one of the problems, it's kind of a problem, but not really, depending how you look at it, of Bethesda style games are the introductions. They under the creation engine. I don't know if it's an engine limitation or just a choice that has become sort of the pattern that's expected. Um, Actually, no, I don't think it's an engine thing because in New Vegas and in this game, the introduction is relatively fast. In other games like Skyrim, it's like, no, you have to have the cinematic and there's no skippable and you have to have the sequence and you have to run and then you have to fight your way through this. So it takes a good 15 minutes to 20 minutes to get to the meat of the game. Fallout 3 had also had a very extensive, I found immersive but extensive um, beginning. So the first fix to that would be sort of a new game plus, or have a flag. This is more gameplay stuff, but as soon as you do that all introduction the first time, you have an automatic save, which means whenever you uh, play the game again, either you uninstall it and play it again, you start there outside of the vault 101, 111, or 111, and go from there. You don't have to go through any of that, right? And the only reason why I suggest that, and I said because I would make it actually a much longer beginning instead of sort of the, oh, here's a baby, here's the spouse, here's a vault, and we go through that, right? Similar to what happened in Fallout 3, where you have actual time skips. You start as a baby, and you start then as a child and a teenager, and and a young adult. I wouldn't have that long a time span. We don't see the growth of the main character. We assume the main character is an adult as they come in. But here's how I would do that. First of all, I would move the action to a train station in Boston, right? And the character does a thing with the mirror, but they're looking at a mirror in that train station instead of the bathroom in the house. And it's spring instead of fall. You would have Ron Perlman do the introduction, like Ward never changes. He actually is in the game. He actually plays the role of a newscaster. So I would have him do that as well, right? No reason why he can play more than one character, the narrator, and also play the newscaster. No reason why it couldn't be. Maybe that the in universe is that he's introducing a sort of a current program, analysis, or about the status of the world in 2077. So yeah, it could be the same character. And you get to choose not only the gender of the character and the looks and all that, with or without mods, but you also get to choose their background. And I never liked the idea that the male character is the guy character is the soldier, but the female character is a lawyer because, of course, she's a female and she shouldn't know anything about guns. Even though when she goes out in the wilderness, she picks up a gun and starts shooting things and, picks up a stick and starts beating people over the head with no problem whatsoever. So we don't get an explanation of why he's the soldier and she's the lawyer. He could be the soldier. He could be the lawyer. She could be the soldier. If you don't want to make her frontline troops in Alaska, you could say that she's a National Guard. Remember the National Guard? They're female National Guard units in the universe of Fallout established by Bethesda. So that could be a thing, right? She's coming back from maneuvers or a support position to the main forces in Alaska and the Battle of Alaska and all that. The Battle of Anchorage. And you transfer from the train station, you get on a car and you sort of have this drive through downtown Boston or maybe take the highway, right? And you get to see the Commonwealth briefly, and then you get to Sanctuary, right? And then you have three vignettes. The arrival, something in summer, maybe having around the picnic that they talk about in the game. And then the fall, the salesman shows up and does the thing, whatever, and away you go into the wall, right? And the idea to do that is to establish these two characters and why you should care about the spouse. Why should you care? Because if I go, she's my wife, she's my husband, he's my husband, he's the baby. Of course I have to care. Like, there's not enough there. You actually get more time with your dad in Fallout 3 and get to know him and have a rapport. And that should be something that there. Also, one of the things that the introduction of Fallout 3 does, and it should be here in Fallout 4 as well, is a source of tension. You get to actually talk back to your dad in Fallout 3 here. They shouldn't be a perfect marriage. Particularly, and this should be the point of contention, whether they want to have a child or not, so a call back to Sean, but also Yeah, I was expecting the Clouds to be more involved than they were. That's according to Chapel One chat. Yeah, that's the thing, right? And and also how they view the world, right? Let's say, I mean, this is pretty stereotypical. It could be flipped as well, but let's say that the character who's in the military is more conservative, and the character who's a lawyer is more liberal, more progressive, and that's gonna be something that's become very important as we move into this into story proper. So the alarm goes off, the bombs come in, they grab each other's hands. They're not unhappy or anything, but they're adults and in a relationship, and sometimes they fight over who left the toilet seat up or whatever. Have a little bit of tension, right? Don't make it a perfect marriage as it seems, like idyllic life. I know what they were shooting for, but it kind of misses the point that the universe, the world of Fallout, particularly before the bombs, it was a horrible place. And that goes all the way back to the original Fallout, where the introduction has a TV replaying some news from before the bombs of two American soldiers in power armor executing a civilian in the streets of Toronto, I think, during the occupation of Canada by American forces. That tells the kind of quality the government of the United States at the time, right? In game. And the introduction sort of talks about it, and you see it in other aspects of the game, but it's never really the main character never really addresses it, completely ignores it. And here that would be a point of contention, right? So off you go, you get frozen, etc. And instead of having somebody come in and literally fridging your partner, right? And if you really want to stretch it, it doesn't even have to be male female. It could be both characters could be male, I suppose. That would be for the drop in, drop out multiplayer option of the game. And you're in there, and then after a couple 100 years, the vault fails. And it turns out everybody's dead because the vault was never meant to be a long-term facility. It was just there as a cruel experiment. You were chosen because you were of a given age and need to experiment on long-term cryogenics, right? The Vault Tech never cared. The United States government, which we know now as known as the remnants as the Enclave, never cared. They were doing their own thing. I think they were planning to go to Mars or something. That was their plan, and then come back or go to the orbit or something, right? Like the 100 kind of situation. So you get unfrozen. You discover that your spouse, and we could put pull a page from a more newer game, The Outer Worlds, in which the other people are just simply frozen. Some of them might be dead. Some of them, either they're dead or they're frozen, and you're trying to find a way to get them out, get your spouse out. And you might decide not to do it. You say, forget it. She's there and they're fine, and I'm not going to deal with them. Right? Give player that agency. You do the whole thing where you kill some roaches and you get to learn how to play the game, how to put on clothes, how to use break into things, use weapons, etc. And out you go. As you go out, again, no major changes to the game up till after you meet Preston and the I think it's Preston, yeah, and the remnants of the Minutemen. And this is where we get into the character learning about the new world and deciding who they want to be. And they have three major choices. They can choose to be, you want to put it politically, modern politics. They could be progressive. That is, they're in a new world. They were critical of the old world, critical of the old government, and said, you know what, that government's dead. All that is destroyed. They led to the destruction of the world. I'm going to build a new world. Right? The Commonwealth is going to be a new chance, a new world. Here's an opportunity to build a new world. You could be conservative, in which you basically want to, at best, return the world the way it was, or at the very least, you want to stamp out all the violence and the excesses, and then just people be more like a libertarian, more like let people be. And my job, mostly as a soldier, that would be the progressive would be more the lawyer, right, and more government focus, etc., and establishing laws and regulations, etc. While the soldier is like, my job is to protect people. I'm not going to rule over them. I just want to, make sure the raiders and all of that. And the third option would be what I call it the evil option, right? The king of becoming the king of the Commonwealth, right? You side with the raiders and other criminal gangs, and take over them, and then decide that you're going to rule the Commonwealth with 100%. All worlds that all the rules are broken. I can do whatever I want, and what I want to do is right, and that would reflect the mechanics, right? Because the mechanics are about exploration, they're about construction, etc., and also would be reflected in the factions. Now, the main villain faction is, of course, the Institute. But you have multiple factions. You have the Institute, you have BOSS, the BOS, which is the Brotherhood of Steel, you have the Underground Railroad, and you have at least, and also the Minutemen. But really, the Minutemen should never be a true faction. The only thing that should happen in the Minutemen is that some Minutemen, like, rebel if you go pro Raider, or at least don't help enough people. You're out for more for yourself, and they break away, and you have to put them down. But that should be the player faction, and they should more or less do whatever the player wants. Because there's only two people there: it's you, the general, and this other person, and then you gather people, right? And in fact, the Minutemen could be used to give legitimacy to, say, if you go the Raider aspect, then the Minutemen are give legitimacy to the Raiders and the Triggermen and the Gunners, etc. Right? So the way I would change how the factions work and how they have every faction should have a sort of dilemma within it, not a dilemma from the outside, but a dilemma from within that apply to the three takes. Right? I would elevate the Raiders and the Triggermen and the Gunners to be an actual faction that you can interact with and use diplomacy, or just shoot a leader, etc., and take over them, right? Or have them fight each other, whatever. Um, in fact, I would have them. Let's start with the Raiders. Would be within the criminal faction, the larger criminal faction. You have three aspects. The Raiders are out and out evil. The Triggermen are old time gangsters, so they would be the more conservative part, right? They would like, okay, as long as crime is not out of control and it's organized, I'm willing to work with them. And in a progressive sense, you would try, I suppose, to, or it could be the other opposite, right? Depending, you could say that the progressives want, they want more civil liberties, stuff like that, so they're willing to work with the Triggermen as long as the Triggermen go legit, right? If you can convince the Triggermen to go legit and essentially put a cap on crime or organized crime, then you can work. And then the Gunners would be, because they're a mercenary band, they would be the faction from the bad guys in a way that'd be converted into, hired to or converted into helping you police the wasteland, right? Um, the the Underground Railroad would be, say, their problem is, and Far Harbor has aspect of it in the DLC. You would continue exploring that in Far Harbor. What is the real meaning of artificial life, right? And is it things that look human and behave human, and that's why they are valuable, or is it anything that demonstrates artificial intelligence? Even though they're not human, they are intelligent, they're sapient and sentient, and therefore worthy of respect. And more to the point, the question would be: is it actually a good idea to erase the memories of Gen 3 uh, synthetics, synths? Because part of it is a bit of a frozen thing. My OBS froze for a second there. Part of it is we are a sum of our memories, right, and our experiences. If we get to erase them completely, then we stop being who we are. So it's a sort of a character death. And we also seen in the game that that system is not perfect, and so if there's something goes wrong, they start having these memories, and they could, a lot of things could happen, including turning violent and destructive, which is one of the arguments that the members of the Institute make about, hunting down weird sins. Then we come to the Brotherhood of Steel, and this is the Brotherhood of Steel. I know why they did it this way, but I think they made a huge mistake. Elder Manson is supposed to be the solution to the idea that the Brotherhood of Steel has to be jerks, right? And that falls into a much larger meta thinking in universes like Fallout 4, that you always need to have conflict. And thus you always have you can never really have a good goody two shoes faction, right? A heroic, a truly heroic faction, which is how what the Brotherhoods do, which is not perfect, but they were a heroic faction in Fallout 3, as opposed to in Fallout 2, which they were practically non-existent. They're there, but it's just it's a side quest thing that's kind of hard to get into, and they were kind of jerks, but with a point, sort of heroic faction in the original Fallout, right? But by Fallout 3, the main faction of the Brotherhood of Steel is, so I repeat that because I slurred my words. Uh, the main faction of the Brotherhood of Steel is mainly heroic with some outcasts, right? And somebody decided, well, no, we need to, make them an antagonist again, or seeming antagonistic. So we're going to have them on the Elder Maxon, be paranoid and want to destroy the Institute, no matter what, etc., and being obsessed with controlling technology at all costs, because reasons, right? And it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So instead, I would say the following: that Elder Maxon he is a nobleman in leading an army. The reason why Elder Maxon is in charge is because he is of the Maxon line, the original leader of the military unit that rebelled and became, from the American government, became the Brotherhood of Steel, was something Maxon. I don't remember the first name. And so he is a direct descendant from that, and that's why he becomes the leader. But that's pure nobility. He hasn't really earned his position. I'm sure he went out in patrols and got into fights with super mutants and the like, but he did not have a major campaign like, for example, the Brotherhood of Steel had against, the Master in, well, they helped actually the Wall Dweller do that, or against the Enclave in Fallout 3, right? Again, with the help of the Wall Dwellers like the Long Wanderer. So he wants to prove himself, right? He has all the backing, all technology that came from defeating the Enclave, including Liberty Prime, but all that comes from Elder Lyons and what he did, and the fact that he was willing to work with others and recruit and expand the Brotherhood, and generally speaking, with some major caveats, because the Brotherhood was pretty racist against, for example, ghouls, among others, and fighting super mutants and sort of, and he doing the project and that actually cleaned up the whole water basin in the DC wasteland, and one assumes that transformed the DC wasteland. They had control over that. So without that, the Brotherhood of Steel could not have been the power that it is, can project power all the way to the Commonwealth in the way they would, hundreds of soldiers, an airship, dozens of vertebrates and all that. They could not do that. Also, I would fix in gameplay having the vertebrates like come down like near on top of things and getting blown up. One of those things happening every so often is cool, but the fact is vertebrates are supposed to be nigh impossible to destroy. So yeah, come on, don't do that. Also, I'm looking down instead of looking at the camera. I apologize. That is a problem, right? So I would deselect for that. Just a little gameplay background element that I would deselect for. But what I would do with the Brotherhood of Steel is I would have that, yes, Elder Maxon has united the Brotherhood of Steel, but his hold on the Brotherhood is very very thin. Right? He doesn't really have a strong control of it. That's why he is going to the Commonwealth. He wants to have his own campaign against a clearly evil faction, in this case, the Institute, right? Who are exploiting technology and creating sense and all that, right? But I would make the idea, instead of making, because everybody's talking, well, it was like, oh yeah, the Institute is going to substitute the entirety of humanity with sense, and like, that doesn't make any sense, right? That's not a threat. Like, how would they? So, I mean, they're not. That would require a campaign of genocide, and the Institute hasn't done that. I mean, they kill a lot of people, but they don't seem to be poised to do that. You have no evidence of that. Instead, I would make that Maxon's private fear, that he feels he's such a fake that he feels that he's utterly replaceable, including by a synth, right? So that's his private fear. And so when you interact with the Brotherhood of Steel, a couple of things would happen. First of all, I would have the Brotherhood of Steel acknowledge the fact that you're the general of the Minutemen, because it kind of makes sense for the Brotherhood of Steel to try to get allies locally. They're from the outside. They're from DC. So I mean, literally, this is like because of the way the wasteland, the post North America, because there's no government, works. They're literally going to another country, right, and dealing with factions and peoples they never met before or barely have any contact with. So finding local allies and then acknowledging that you're the general, if you've taken that role, of the Minuteman and trying to work with the Minuteman would be a good idea. Instead of simply having the main character go like, "Oh, now you're a paladin. We're just gonna make you a paladin." You were not even made a paladin. You were not made a paladin in Fallout, and you were not made a paladin in Fallout 3. So why have the story be that your character has to become just another soldier of the Brotherhood to be under the control of Maxon? I mean, no. And the thing is that they're set up to be like the Brotherhood of Steel and the Enclave are supposed to be sort of gray and gray morality where they're basically the same. And I don't like that. I know Wasteland is supposed to be hard nosed ideas, and nobody's truly a good person. Although, if you look at the stories from Fallout all the way to Fallout 3 and beyond, except for New Vegas, the characters are canonically heroes, and they're goody two shoes all the time, and they help everybody for various reasons. But that's what they do, canonically speaking. That you could do something else in those games, and you could playing as a bad guy has always been an alternative to a degree in the Fallout series. Again, New Vegas is different, and we're not talking about New Vegas. I don't want to get into that rabbit hole there. Anyway, so you would have an option depending what you're doing. If you're going for the progressive route, you want to undermine the Brotherhood and expose Magnuson as being a paranoid, and you might have to kill him or have him step down or something. You're going the diplomatic route, etc. And essentially, you convince the Brotherhood to work with you, but not try to take over the Commonwealth. Maybe leave an embassy, stuff like that. Especially if you deal with the Institute the way the progressive track will allow you to deal with the Institute. If you're going the conservative route, then essentially, yes, you become a member of the Brotherhood. Essentially, you become you destroy the Institute, which is what the Brotherhood is want to do. They take whatever weapons tech they take from it and destroy everything else, or most of everything, and they study everything else, right? But they take hold of it because they don't want anybody to have it. And you become essentially the leader of the Brotherhood in the Commonwealth, but second only to Elder Maxon. You become the local elder here, but you establish a branch of the Brotherhood in the Commonwealth, and you basically set up to patrol and stamp down raiders and super mutants and stuff like that. And protecting the people that run the Brotherhood, protecting the people of the Commonwealth against violent forces and technology, but never really ruling over them. Right? In the progressive track, you're trying to rule over them, but not I might not be the sole ruler, but you want to create a new government, etc., which is there's shades of that in the narrative. And if you're from the Raider evil faction, right, you want to take over the Commonwealth, and you just want to drive away or destroy the Brotherhood, take over their stuff, also probably take over the Institute and destroy them, and take all the goodies for you in the Army of Synths, the Army of Robots, the power armor, the weapons, the vertebrates, and establish yourself as a new power here, right? And finally, we get to the Institute. Because the Institute, I would have made the Institute a little more of a mystery, right? Again, because you have the story with Sean, the Institute is sort of, again, out of focus. And then when it comes into focus, listen, having the infiltration of the Institute be you show up and Father is waiting for you and tells you, hey, we want you to join you. Doesn't make him very smart at all. Kind of makes it kind of dumb. I would actually have an infiltration of the Institute. Maybe have your character take over a courser, right, and play the role of a courser, or reprogram a courser so that the courser would go in and spy with them, and maybe you're playing a role of someone they found and they want to recruit to the Institute, but you're just simply being sneaky and avoiding everybody, and playing like I don't know, but you really are infiltrating the Institute. And as you infiltrate the Institute, realize that the problem with the Institute is essentially it has become a survivalist cult. right? For all they talk about having high technology and be able to change the surface, if they can eventually, someday, that they're the biggest and brightest hope for not only Commonwealth but humanity, you realize that the only thing that the institute, the hardcore institute's leadership, including Father, led by Father, I mean, the fact that he's called Father, that's pretty much like a cult anyway. The only thing they care about is survival. That's why they're so. That's why they send people. They substitute people with sins. That's why they destroy any attempt from any force to unite the Commonwealth. Anything and everything that can be seen as a threat to the Commonwealth, Father and his predecessors will do whatever it takes to undermine it and destroy it. He will claim, as most cult leaders do, that he is misunderstood, but at the end of the day, that's what he wants to do. And I would have different groups within the institute. For example, there is a storyline, a part of the story that there's a scientist that came from the outside, came into the institute, but she used to work for the Brotherhood of Steel, and you are there to convince her to to essentially defect to the Brotherhood of Steel from the institute. I would use that as I would do that with a couple of characters. Would have her as Lee, Madison Lee, which plays a significant role in the story for all three. I never liked the fact that she joined the institute, but kind of makes sense. But she is critical of the institute, so especially from somebody from the outside who's seen really what's happening and seeing like the institute's doing great work, but it amounts to nothing. Right. So her faction within the institute would be, we're doing a lot of work that amounts to nothing. Then you have another action. The father faction would be the current leadership, who believe that anything and everything the Institute does, including creating an army of slaves, essentially, in the word of sense, is necessary to guarantee the survival of the Institute, first and foremost. One day, perhaps, in his great plans, himself or somebody comes after him, and when you are found out, or you make an approach to him, or he finds out that you're there, he makes sense like, listen, I know you heard all these things about it, but I'm going to give you a chance, even if you kill me, or whatever, or drive me away. The work of the institute should continue. These people shouldn't suffer. So why don't you take over? And when you take over, essentially, you have a choice. Could be the hidden choice of, which is actually in the game, of continuing the work of the institute. And it's hinted that you can actually do something good with it, but again, doesn't amount to anything. And that would be a dead end, a secret dead end, where you take the role of father, you become the new father, and the status quo. So that would be the fourth option, to maintain the status quo. But otherwise, you would have, for example, people who want to liberate the states. And if you made a connection with the Underground Railroad, essentially what you're trying to do there is stop synth production and liberate all synths, and get the institute to stop using synth technology, creating a slave rate, liberate the synths, stop using, right? Of course, without the synths, the institute would have to eventually break up because they don't have a labor force. There are too few of them, actual humans living there. They don't have the numbers. So eventually, you would work out a situation where the institute would be abandoned. They would have to go to the surface, take all their tech, and do that, and you may have to decommission to the synth production, and you could actually go to the linking to the factions, go to the Brotherhood of Steel. So listen, we deactivated the synth production. They're destroyed, right? They're on the surface. We're policing them now. Your paranoia about being Manson. Your paranoia about being bumped over by synth. It's just that. It's just paranoia, right? Just get over it. And you, of course, have the option of just destroying the institute wholeheartedly, just blowing it up, which is really what you do in the game, more or less, unchanged. And depending on the changes, again, if you're progressive, you would try to undermine and ultimately, I think, kill Father and take over the institute, and have that technology be used to, with some caveats such as stop synth production, and other, more dangerous technologies, immoral technologies, but use that knowledge to improve the Commonwealth. And if you're conservative, you just destroy the institute, and if you're the conqueror of the institute, you loot the institute, you destroy it, and you take whatever you can use, enslave whoever you need to, and the scientists, and then the fourth option is maintaining the status quo by joining the institute, right? So you have those four options there, which are reflective of the game. Another thing I would have would be time skips. Now, I talked about time skips before in the channel, in the YouTube channel. They can be badly used, Dragon Age 2. But in this case, I think the whole idea of building communities and transforming the Commonwealth should require days, weeks, and even months, even years passing. You can have like a montage, depending on what choice you make, where you see the skyline of Boston and you see the sun going across the sky, which would be um, my right to my left, like this, but left to right to you. And you see, for example, if you're progressive, you see that old buildings are coming down and new buildings are coming in. If you're conservative or status quo, nothing really changes except that you see more traffic. There's, more vertebrates in the sky and more police forces if you're Brotherhood of Steel. Or if you're status quo, nothing really changes. And if you're from the Raider faction, right, you essentially you see Boston even decay faster and have more bodies and more things and more fighting and more like that, but you're the king of it, right? And essentially that's how I would do it. I would create a story that fits the gameplay and expands upon the gameplay, on the base building, base clearing, supply management aspects of the game, and exploration with the game. And just again, punt Sean. No Sean. No need for Sean whatsoever. Said, well, where's father comes from? Well, father just was just another child of the institute. That over time, what once was a group of scientists just trying to keep surviving and keeping on the work, became a cult, a survivalist cult, basically, with high technology. Um, and you deal with the Brotherhood of Steel. They either you ally themselves with them, and they leave an embassy there to monitor things, but they go back to the DC wasteland. They take over at least the security of the DC wasteland by merging the Gunners and merging Brotherhood of Steel and also the Minutemen. You have the takeover of the brother of the Commonwealth and the destruction of probably the death of all of the or most of the Brotherhood of Steel and the also I think because also going after the Underground Railroad, because you want to conquer the Commonwealth, you would have no problem having an army of synths. I mean, you see them how they're being built. It may take what takes let's say that the limited manufacturing capabilities of the institute can build 2 cents per day, 2 Gen 3s. That's 2 cents per day. That's up to 48 cents per day, 2 cents per hour, because we see two of them, or two or three bats. So let's say anywhere between 24 to 72 cents per day. Per month would be 700 or 1,000 cents a month, right? If you want to conquer the world, having an army of synths, right, would be a thing to do. I mean, they obey orders. They are, deadly, especially the cursors. They can be programmed to do almost anything. They can assassinate and infiltrate your enemies. And of course, the Underground Railroad would be like, oh no, you're worse than the Institute, and we're going to fight against you. They still become the underground fighting force against you. Maybe you destroy them, whatever. And you continue to play the game after the ending, right? Because this will be the narrative ending, but you would keep exploring more places. You can see the different DLC would fit in, especially Nuka Cola with the Raider ending, Far Harbor with the synth ending, supporting the synths, and so on and so forth, right? It also would fix a problem that I have with the companions, because the problem with the companions, and I long time ago I suggested that should be something that they should have done for Dragon Age 2, but because the way the narrative is, the factions are built here, it is a cool idea that many, not all, the NPCs, the companions, are tied to a specific faction. But that also means that if you're not interested in following the story of that particular faction, then exploring who this character is kind of hard to do, right? Unless you basically take them and go like, okay, I did enough of the Brotherhood of Steel in order to get Dance in my party, and now we're just gonna run around the Commonwealth doing side missions, right? Um, with Dance, so Dance can talk to me and I can get to know Dance, right? Just an example, right? Sort of a faction tied NPC, major companion. Another thing will be also that I would rewrite the way uh, the Minutemen missions are done, because I think people hate those Minutemen missions. The companions feel like set dressing. Yeah, I mean they're a little bit more than that because some of the companions are actually tied to certain areas, and I do like the companions. I love Piper, for example, and some others. But the way that the Minutemen, particularly Minutemen side missions, are made, are dealt with, feels like the Radiant missions in Skyrim. Like they're just a series of side quests for you to just level up and do stuff, and that should be the center of it. So I would have like, okay, here's several stages, right? I'm talking about Kingmaker. Now, Pathfinder Kingmaker kind of works it that way, right? If you're building a kingdom, you're building a new nation. So, hey, first we need to secure places for people to live. Then those people need to eat. They need defenses, and we need supplies, and we need stuff like that. So I would rework not only not so much the mechanics, but the narrative around those missions to give it to fit into what you're really doing. Again, you build the narrative to the gameplay that you're doing. So you would say, okay, we're not, it's kind of hinted at that, oh, we have a thriving farmland, but nothing really comes of that other than maybe you can connect the supply line, but the supply lines connect the workshops and not the food. So people still have to grow food there. So having a hydroponic garden that can do multi fruit doesn't help feed people across the map, even though they're connected with a supply line. So that's something I would build to, right? Trying to build another conference of different groups in the Commonwealth, etc. That would be what I would aim for, and also have more stuff like calling artillery on people, which I thought was a lot of fun, you know, and new guns and stuff like that. Just focus on the sandbox and have a story that supports free roaming and gives the player some. Here we give actually 4 options for the player to explore, right? And be able to, instead of sort of passively following the factions, because that's what happens when you play with the factions. Like, oh, we're doing a faction, all of a sudden they're like, well, you need to do this, and you're like, what? I don't want to do that. Yeah, but that's, we want to continue the story. You have to do this. And like, yeah, but that's kind of dumb. I don't want to do that. Also, the whole blowing up the institute really, and I'm not the first one to say this, doesn't make any sense, right? Because here's a lot of, I mean, this is as far as we know, this is the most sophisticated faction that we've met up to this point. And I think the reason why it was written that way was to this, just like the Brotherhood of Steel, it's to, again, status quo is king, right? You cannot have such a technologically advanced faction, because eventually what's going to happen is that, you're no longer going to be post-apocalyptic. You're going to be a new world situation that they can grow crops and build, servants that can serve people and new power and all that stuff, manufacturing facilities and advanced knowledge from both the past and the present and the future. It just radically changes the narrative to the point where it's unrecognizable, right? The answer to that is it doesn't really matter, because you have an entire planet Earth. You have not only the entirety of North America, the United States of America, to play with, but also North America, South America. You can go anywhere. So there's always spaces to go. And of course, Fallout 76 actually turned back the clock to about 20, 30 years, a generation or so after the bombs fell. Anyway, there's plenty of places to do that. So there's no need to panic. Yeah, that might be something happening in the Commonwealth. And eventually, we'll have to set up a reset or reboot of the entire franchise. Maybe we'll see what Microsoft does with it. But the idea that you have to always destroy, either you join with the bad guys because they're the baddies and just do more of the same, or you blow them up. There's doesn't seem the only out there is like, oh, we're gonna blow them up, but we're gonna let the women and children essentially escape the institute, and that's it. I think that the Minutemen do that; they blow it up, but they're like, oh, we're gonna give the people a chance to evacuate those who want to evacuate. Well, you still lose the tech. You lose a lot, right? So it just, yeah, no. And again, that's for Fallout 3. Actually, you see that things are moving forward. And I guess they didn't want to do that in Fallout 4. They want to move too far ahead. So, which breaks with tradition because in Fallout 2 they move ahead, and Fallout 3 they move ahead. So why not do that here? Eh, that's I understand why they did it, but I just don't agree with it. So that's it. That's a pretty simple, straightforward fix. We just taken the script to Fallout 4 and fix it by ripping out a couple of pages, probably half of the pages, and reworking the factions. And away you go. So, Chabamon, everyone else, thank you for coming. Probably this will be up during the week on YouTube on Lesson Land channel. If you want to support the channel, there's many ways to do so, including following, subscribing, dropping bits, telling all your friends, sharing it on media. And so, yeah. Next up, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm probably going to do KOTOR, but it depends on my schedule. The schedule is being very hefty. So maybe next Saturday there won't be a Script Doctors. I hope there will be because I have to do some other things. But probably the next Script Doctor is going to be KOTOR 2. And if you have any suggestions as well, I may also do a Dragon Age 2 Script Doctors. Then it's a lot as well. And some other characters. So thank you for coming. As always, we'll see you. We'll see you. Bye-bye, everybody.